Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the most quietly devastating gaps between what America said it was and what it actually did. The post-war years, roughly 1946 to 1962, and what they look like if you were raising children alone. Not the father knows best version. Not the station wagon and the split level and the husband home by 6. The version with the newspaper ad that said adults only, the bank account that vanished the morning after the divorce decree, and the arithmetic that never once came out even. If you enjoy this kind of quietly indignant, matter-of-fact history, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to. And a huge thank you to one of you who suggested this one. I hope the powdered milk flashbacks are minimal. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whatever the clock in your room insists it is. Somewhere on this map it's 3 a.m. And statistically, at least several of you are listening from a room where the TV is still on with no one watching it. Dim the lights, turn on a fan, get comfortable, and pull the blanket up, maybe just slightly tighter than usual, because we're about to do some arithmetic that is going to make you want to lie down. Have you ever wondered what happened to the 1.9 million households the 1,960 census quietly counted and then filed away? What did you actually do when the newspaper said, "No children on every third listing"? Could you survive a month on $120 before rent, before the bus fare, before the doctor with 3 kids and a social worker who shows up at 6 in the morning to check under the beds? Why did the bank close your account the same week the judge handed you the decree? Did the Bowlby report, the Spock book, and the evening news all somehow agree that you were the problem? The casserole on the shelf, powdered milk, government cornmeal, a can of something pork adjacent, how many nights in a row does it go before it stops feeling like dinner and starts feeling like a verdict? And what exactly does a 5-cent banana mean to a child who's never been told it's a treat? And so, you've woken up in Chicago in the February of 1955. The bus stop is 4 blocks from the apartment you are not sure you'll have next month, and the toddler's mittens are wet through already. Good luck. You wake at 5:30 in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a brick building in Chicago, and the first thing your mind does is arithmetic. Rent is $48 on the first. Streetcar is 20 cents each way. The sitter is $12 a week. There is half a roast in the icebox and a heel of bread on the counter and an envelope from the gas company that you have not opened. You sit up, you add the column. The numbers do not change in your favor. The column at the bottom of the yellow page is the same column it was yesterday. You bring home $35 a week as a typist at a firm on Michigan Avenue. You type 80 words a minute. The man 2 desks over types 55 and earns 50. The firm calls this a breadwinner differential, which is a real institutional term that means your children are not official dependents until someone with a different salary grade fathered them. The math was not designed to work for you. It was designed assuming you weren't the only one doing it. The sitter is Mrs. Kowalski from the 3rd floor, who watches your daughter from 7 until 5:30 for $12 a week and considers this a favor, which it is. There is no other option. The Lanhamac daycare centers that opened during the war, the ones that watched the children of women doing the work men had left behind, closed in 1946. Congress decided the emergency was over. The emergency is not over. You are the emergency. The envelope from the gas company has been on the counter for 4 days. You know what's in it. You're waiting for a version of Tuesday where the number inside is manageable. That version of Tuesday has not arrived yet. You open it now, in the grey pre-dawn, in your slip, with your daughter still asleep behind the curtain. The number is not manageable. You fold it back up and put it under the roast. Breakfast is oatmeal made with water because the powdered milk ran out on Thursday. The powdered milk comes in a paper sack and tastes like chalk dissolved in the memory of milk, faintly sour, aerodynamically beige, the kind of flavour a child remembers for the rest of her life as the specific taste of a particular year. Your daughter drinks it without complaint because she doesn't know there's another version. You drink your coffee black and stand at the window and watch the street lights go off one by one down the block. By 6:15 you have dressed her, packed her bag, argued briefly about the coat, lost, and renegotiated the coat. Mrs. Kowalski's door opens before you knock. She has a look that means she clocked the gas envelope, and she takes your daughter by the hand with the quiet efficiency of a woman who has seen this kitchen from the doorway many times. She is small, deliberate, and unfailingly correct about other people's mornings. She doesn't say anything. That is a kindness. You say thank you and mean it completely and go down the stairs and out into February. The bus stop is half a mile from the apartment. The streetcar doesn't come down your block. You walk it with your coat buttoned to the throat, past the soot-grey snowbanks and the road salt and the exhaust of a city waking up without any particular interest in your schedule. A woman named Eleanor Brandt, who lives 2 streets over and takes the same car downtown, once told you she read that the suburbs have buses that go directly to the train station. You have heard that the suburbs also have washing machines that belong to you and yards with grass and schools where the boiler works. You are aware that you do not live there. The FHA made certain of that. A neighborhood with women like you in it, the underwriting manual explains in federal language, is a lending risk. You are, apparently, a geological feature, an unstable formation, not to be mortgaged against. The streetcar comes, you get on, you find a seat by the window and the city moves past in its grey morning way and you do the arithmetic again, automatically, the way your tongue finds a sore tooth. 48, 20 cents times 10 days. $12. The gas bill. The column doesn't balance. It has never balanced. You have simply been deciding every morning which number weights. You walk down to the manager's apartment on the first day of the month with the rent folded inside an envelope and the envelope folded inside your purse. He opens the door in shirt sleeves and counts the bills slowly while you stand in the hallway. He asks how the children are. He has asked this every month for 2 years. The question is not friendly. It is a reminder that you have children, that there is no husband at the door behind you, and that he can decide every month whether to take the envelope. There is no federal law that says he has to. The Fair Housing Act, the one that would make this kind of refusal illegal, won't pass until 1968. Right now, it's 1957, and the newspaper classifieds are perfectly legal about it. Adults only, they read, sometimes in capital letters. No children. A few add professional building, which is doing a lot of work for 2 words. You found this apartment because someone at work knew someone whose cousin was moving out. You found it the way most things get found when the official channels are closed. Sideways, through people, with a favour attached. Missus. Flaherty on the 3rd floor slips you a copy of the classifieds sometimes, circled in red pencil, in case anything opens up. She does it quietly, like she's handing you contraband. She is not wrong about what it is. The building itself has opinions. The hallway carpet is the colour of a grudge, flat, brown, and faintly aggrieved by foot traffic. The radiator in the 2nd bedroom rattles at 3A meter, with the confidence of something that knows it can't be replaced. The lock on the front door requires you to lift the handle at a precise angle before turning the key, and you've never been able to explain the angle to anyone else, which means no one can pick up the children in an emergency, which is one of several facts about your life you try not to think about on a Tuesday. Consider, for a moment, where you might have gone instead. The new suburbs ringing the city are financed through FHA and VA loans, low interest, government-backed, built for the returning veteran and his family. The FHA underwriting manual, the one that decides which neighbourhoods get mortgage money and which don't, rates areas with unmarried women as poor lending risks. That's the official position, not a rumour, not an attitude. A policy document. The suburbs were not built for you, which is the polite way of saying the federal government paid to build a place you couldn't enter. You couldn't buy there anyway. The bank won't give you a mortgage without a male co-signer, and the male co-signer is the specific person you are no longer married to. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the one that would change this, won't arrive until 1974. You do the math. You stop doing the math. So the hallway is where you are. The manager finishes counting. He folds the bills into his breast pocket, and for 1 month the question of whether you're staying is settled. He doesn't say anything else. You nod. He closes the door. You go back upstairs and start the coffee. The children are still asleep. The rent is paid. These 2 facts are the entire good news for the morning, and you hold them carefully, the way you hold the envelope, folded tight, close to the body, not trusting the outside air with it. You sit at a small desk in the corner of an insurance office on Wabash and fill out an employment application in blue ink. Name, address, age, education, references, 3 years of prior employment. Halfway down the page is a row of small boxes marked married, single, widowed, divorced. You hold the pen above the page for a moment. The receptionist behind the counter is not looking at you, but the form will be. You check divorced. The pen makes a small, precise sound. You already know which stack the application is going to. The wages reflect this. Median full-time income for a woman working in 1955 is about $1,900 a year. The man at the next desk doing equivalent work earns $3,400. This isn't a gap that crept in by accident. Many employers maintain what they call a male breadwinner differential, which pays women less on the explicit assumption that a husband exists somewhere to cover the rest. If no husband exists, the differential does not adjust. The math has a philosophy, and the philosophy isn't interested in your situation. Margaret, who processes the applications at the insurance office, is brisk, watchful, and reliably correct about which pile is which. She tips her reading glasses down to look at yours. She sets it in the left pile. Margaret does not explain the left pile. The left pile explains itself by the end of the week when you haven't heard back. The classifieds in the Times, Tribune Times tell you which jobs you can apply for before the form does. Certain jobs are open to you: typist, telephone operator, seamstress, retail clerk, school cafeteria worker. These jobs pay between $28 and $42 a week in a city like Chicago in 1955. A typist earning $35 a week takes home, after tax, something closer to $30. Childcare for one child runs $12 to $15 a week, if you can find it. That leaves under $20 for rent, food, bus fare, shoes, the electricity bill, and whatever your child needs from a doctor. The math doesn't balance. It was never meant to. Of course, there's also the Bowlby problem. John Bowlby published a report for the World Health Organization in 1951, arguing that children separated from their mothers during the working day suffered lasting psychological damage. The report is about children in institutions, orphanages, hospitals. By 1955, it's being cited as scientific proof that a working mother is harming her child simply by leaving the house. The paperwork is on the shelf next to Benjamin Spock's Baby and Childcare, which sells 750,000 copies a year and addresses itself entirely to couples. You are not a couple. The shelf does not know this. So you are simultaneously told that staying home is necessary for your child's mental health and offered no income with which to do it. You are told that working damages your child. You are told that not working means your child doesn't eat. The two instructions do not resolve. They were written by different offices and nobody checked the arithmetic. Back on Wabash, the insurance company will eventually call a woman named Patricia with a husband and 3 years less experience. Patricia will start the following Monday. The left pile will go out in Tuesday's trash. You'll take the bus home, stop at the grocery on the corner, check the price of the chicken, put it back, and buy the canned thing. The classified for the next job is folded in your coat pocket already. You've been refining your handwriting on these forms for 4 months. It's very good handwriting now. You stand at the corner of Halsted and Madison at 6:40 in the morning with your daughter on your hip and a vinyl handbag over your shoulder. The bus is 15 minutes late. Your daughter is wearing a snowsuit that does not zip all the way, and mittens connected by a string that has been retied twice this week. You shift her weight to your other side. Your arm has been numb since Cicero Avenue. The sitter's apartment is 8 more blocks after the transfer. The sitter charges by the hour and starts the clock when you knock. The bus system does not know you have a child. The bus system does not particularly care. The route was designed around the commute patterns of men going downtown to offices, not women going sideways through neighborhoods to drop a toddler somewhere before doubling back to a typing pool. There's no direct line. There is never a direct line. You take 2 buses, sometimes 3, and the math of the transfers is something you've done so many times it runs automatically, like breathing, except breathing doesn't cost 30 cents. The groceries. You do them on Thursdays because Thursday is payday and the money exists for approximately 48 hours before it distributes itself into rent, the sitter, the electric bill, and whatever's left. You carry the bags because there is no car. The FHA has an opinion about your neighborhood, and that opinion does not include mortgage access, which means you do not own, which means you rent, which means you are on the bus, which means you carry the bags. 2 canvas bags, 1 vinyl handbag, 1 toddler. Your arms are basically a logistics operation with a coat. Margaret, the sitter, opens her door in a housecoat and takes your daughter without making eye contact, which is fine. This is a transaction, not a friendship, and both of you know it. She hands back a mitten that fell off in the hallway. She doesn't say anything about it. The mitten has been falling off since October. The walk from the bus stop to the office is 4 blocks, which is fine in April and a minor catastrophe in January. Road salt gets into everything. Your good shoes, The ones you wear for the office because the office has opinions about shoes have a seam splitting on the left heel. You've been pressing the seam down with your thumb each morning in the bathroom mirror. It's holding. Barely. The seam has developed a personality about this arrangement, and the personality is not optimistic. Now, the arithmetic that nobody says out loud. The sitter is $12 a week, sometimes $14 if you run late, which you do when the bus runs late, which the bus does. That's against a weekly wage of $35 before taxes. After taxes, you're at $30. $14 to the sitter, $7.50 to your share of rent. You're splitting a 2-bedroom with another woman who also works downtown and also has a child, and the building's landlord has a clause that technically prohibits children but has chosen not to enforce it yet. He could. He reviews this decision approximately whenever the rent is a day late. The cold at this corner has its own personality, flat, patient, and aggressively uninterested in your schedule. Not the dramatic cold, the romantic kind from movies. The other kind, the cold that is just there every morning, pressing it against the wrong side of your coat while the bus idles and exhaust drifts across the stop at ankle height, and your daughter, 4 years old and already bored by all of it, wants to be put down and then immediately wants to be picked back up. You pick her up. Your arm goes numb again. The bus is still not here. The classified ads for apartments read, in the cheerful sans serif font of the Tribune real estate section. Adults only, no children, quiet building. You've learned to translate. Adults only means you. No children means your daughter. Quiet building means the landlord has decided in advance that your life is too loud to be permitted. It's a rejection letter formatted as a rental listing. The Tribune charges by the word and the landlords are getting their money's worth. The transfer comes. You get on. Someone gives you a seat without being asked, which happens about half the time, and which you accept without ceremony, because there is no time for ceremony. Your daughter sits on your lap and touches the window and says something about a dog she saw yesterday. You say yes. You're already thinking about the seam on your shoe and whether the office has a stapler you could use on it during lunch. You sit at desk number 11 in a row of 14 identical desks, each with a royal typewriter, a metal lamp, and a wire basket for incoming work. The supervisor passes behind you at 9:10 and drops a stack of pink carbon copies into the basket without breaking his stride. Your weekly pay is $35 before tax. The man who pushes the mail cart between floors makes $58. You asked once, in your second year, why the difference. You were told the difference had been worked out. It has been worked out. Specifically, it has been worked out that you have, or should have, a husband. The wage is built on that assumption. It is called a male breadwinner differential, which is a formal way of saying your paycheck already assumes someone else is handling the important half. The fact that no one is handling the important half is your own administrative problem. Let's talk about Dorothy Marsh, who sits at desk 7. Dorothy has been here 11 years. She is quick, exact, and quietly indispensable. She types 93 words per minute, catches errors in the carbon copies before they reach the supervisor's desk, and once reconstructed an entire quarterly report from a melted ribbon and her own notes. She knows where every file lives. She is, in the functional sense, running the floor. Her salary is also $35. Dorothy brings her lunch in a wax paper bag and eats it at her desk in 11 minutes, because there is somewhere she has to be at 5 o'clock sharp, and the lunch break is the only moment she has to think about getting there. The typing pool exists somewhere between a classroom and a waiting room. Everyone is very busy, and no one is going anywhere. The men above you came in as trainees and were promoted into offices with doors. You came in as a typist and were, if anything, very good at it, which mostly meant you stayed. You are too useful at desk 11 to be moved anywhere else. That is the nicest way anyone will ever say it. The other thing that has been worked out is that the job doesn't hold the position for you when you're sick. No sick pay, no short-term leave, no placeholder. If your daughter runs a fever on a Tuesday, the choice is between going to work and not going to work, and neither option has a good outcome. You go, she's alone, or you've paid the neighbor $2 you don't have. You don't go. You lose the day's wages. And if it happens twice in a month, the supervisor has a conversation with you that begins with the word times reliability. The supervisor uses times reliability times the way a thermostat uses temperature. Reading, not opinion. The Bowlby Report, published in 1951 by the World Health Organization, confirms what the supervisor already suspects. that a mother who leaves home to work is causing measurable psychological harm to her child. John Bowlby is a British psychiatrist. He is thorough. He is cited constantly. The implication, extended to its logical end, is that you should not be at desk 11 at all, that the correct solution is to go home, which would require money, which requires the desk. Nobody flags this as a structural problem. It gets filed under personal choices. Your paycheck arrives in a brown envelope on Fridays, $35 minus tax, minus the $2 you advance from next week. You cash it at the currency exchange on Halstead because you don't have a bank account in your own name anymore. The joint account was in his name, and the joint account is closed, and your credit history went with it, cleanly, the way a pulled thread takes the whole hem. The currency exchange takes a fee. The fee is small. The fee is every time. The Royal Typewriter at desk 11 doesn't care about any of this. It just jams on the letter E, which you've learned to hit at a slightly oblique angle, and it has been doing this since 1952, and nobody has fixed it. You have adapted. That's mostly how things work here. You unwrap a wax paper sandwich at 12:15 at your desk, because the coffee shop on the corner charges 30 cents for a tuna salad, and you have planned the week around 40 cents of food a day. The bread is from yesterday. The cheese is the orange brick from the surplus box. You eat slowly and stare at the page in your typewriter. The other typists go down to the basement cafeteria together and come back with paper cups and laughter. You smile at them when they pass. You have explained the headache twice this month. The surplus box arrives from the county distribution office on alternating Tuesdays. It doesn't always arrive on Tuesdays. What it always contains is the orange brick, a paper sack of powdered milk that smells like chalk and institutional regret, canned pork that opens with a key you have to twist very slowly or the lid bites back, and cornmeal. The powdered milk goes into the children's cups because regular milk is 16 cents a quart. You drink the powdered milk too, eventually. It has a faintly sour finish. Not bad, not good, just aggressively present, the way a colour is present when there's no other colour to look at. Let's talk about the 40 cents. It's not a budget. It's an equation with no slack in it. Breakfast is oatmeal from a bulk bag. Dinner is whatever stretches, the canned pork, the cornmeal, an egg if there are eggs. Lunch at the desk is the one meal you control completely, which is why you protect it. The wax paper is folded and saved. You have developed a small, serious relationship with wax paper. A woman named Helen, 2 floors up in billing, brings an orange on Fridays. She is small, deliberate, and quietly extravagant about it. She peels it at her desk with the focused ceremony of someone performing a small, private ritual, and the smell travels. You've noticed it from the elevator bank. Her kids get orange segments in their school lunches on Fridays, a 5-cent orange. She times it to Friday because Friday is the day that makes the week feel survivable. The cafeteria in the basement costs 35 cents for a full hot plate, meat, 2 vegetables, a roll. This is, in cash terms, the more efficient meal. The math is not the point. Joan from Records pushes her tray along the rail and laughs at something Dottie said, and Dottie repeats it for the woman behind her. And by 2:15, the inside joke has been repeated 4 more times at desks you can hear from your row. You'd pay 35 cents to be in on the joke. You don't have 35 cents. Medicaid doesn't exist yet. That's a fact for 1965. You are in 1955. A doctor's visit is $3 to $5, which is most of a day's wages, which means the winter cold that won't leave your chest stays in your chest until it leaves on its own. Aspirin crushed into orange juice handles the fever in the children. Warm oil from the stovetop, dropped carefully into an ear canal, handles the earache. You learned both of these from your mother, who learned them from hers, which makes them a kind of inheritance. Not the inheritance anyone was planning on. The Salk polio vaccine was approved in April 1955, which means the years before April 1955 involved a specific kind of dread that doesn't translate well into the present tense. A child with polio means a hospital bill. A hospital bill means a debt with no ceiling and no forgiveness clause. The polio ward has a waiting list. The debt does not have a waiting list. The debt moves immediately and with great confidence. The other typists come back from the cafeteria with paper cups. You smile at them and fold the wax paper and slide it into your desk drawer for tomorrow. The bread will be a day older. The cheese will be the same. You walk into the savings and loan on State Street at lunchtime to ask about a car loan because the bus to the new sitter takes an hour each way and the children are not home before 7. The man at the desk wears a grey suit and a tie clip and gestures to the chair across from him. He listens politely. He asks who will be co-signing. You say no one. He folds his hands. He says the bank cannot extend credit to a woman without a male co-signer. He says it like a weather report. You have been working for 4 years. You have a pay stub. You have a savings account, small but present, with your name on it, which you opened yourself, which no one helped you with, which you guard the passbook for like it contains a state secret. None of this is information the man in the grey suit finds relevant. The pay stub confirms you earn wages. The savings account confirms you manage money. The loan officer confirms neither of these things is the point. The credit history, in your case, is straightforward. You don't have one. Not really. The joint account you and your ex-husband shared for 9 years. The one where your check was deposited every 2 weeks. The one where every bill was paid. That account was in his name. When the decree came through, the account closed. The history closed with it. You walked out of that marriage with a suitcase, 2 children, and a credit record that reads like a blank page, which is basically what happens when you let someone else hold the deed to your own financial existence for a decade, and then the decade ends. Mr. Hartley at the desk. You can see his nameplate from your side of the table. Neat, level, and very recently polished. Slides a form across to you anyway. He says if you can provide a male relative who is willing to act as guarantor, the bank would be happy to reconsider. Your father is 67 and lives in Cincinnati. Your brother rents. You smile because you don't know what else to do with your face, and you take the form, and you fold it in half, and you put it in your purse, and you know you will never fill it out. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act doesn't pass until 1974. That's 19 years from now. The form knows this. It sits in your purse with the structural confidence of a document that is in absolutely no hurry. Outside, there's a used car lot 3 blocks north. You've passed it 6 times. A 1952 Chevy in the window, pale blue, priced at $385. The lot offers its own financing. You go in on a Thursday afternoon and the salesman, whose name is Gary and who is wearing a short-sleeved dress shirt despite it being February, tells you the terms. $12 a week. You do the math on the walk back to the bus stop. $12 a week for 36 weeks is $432 on a $385 car, which is an interest rate of, you work it out on the back of the grocery receipt, somewhere above 30% annually. Gary did not mention the rate. Gary mentioned the weekly payment and gestured at the blue hood. Installment financing in 1955 is the only credit product reliably available to single women without a cosigner, and it costs roughly what you'd expect from a product that knows you have no alternative. A washing machine from the appliance store on Halstead runs the same logic, which is basically a payday loan with a wash cycle. $10 down, $7 a week, and by the time you've paid it off, you've bought it twice. The machine itself doesn't comment on this arrangement. It just runs its cycle and drains and spins like the whole thing is perfectly fair, which is the most irritating thing about it. You take the bus home, an hour each way, as established. You pick up the children from the sitter, who takes cash, on Fridays, in an envelope, no exceptions, and you walk the last 4 blocks in the February dark with a toddler on your hip and a bag of groceries cutting into your wrist, and the stroller bouncing over the cracked sidewalk. The street salt gets into the stroller wheels. The wheels make a sound like something quietly giving up. The Chevy stays on the lot. You check the next Thursday. Still there. Still blue. You receive a letter from Marshall Fields 3 weeks after the decree is final, informing you that your charge account has been closed. The account was in your husband's name. The Visa card you used at the grocery for 2 years was in your husband's name. The gas station card, the Webolt's card, every line of small institutional trust you had built over 8 years of marriage, every one of them was in his name. You open a checking account in your own name on a Tuesday afternoon. You begin again at 0. The checking account is not nothing. It is genuinely something. It means your paycheck goes somewhere with your name on it, and the teller will eventually learn your face. What it doesn't mean is credit. Credit is a different conversation, and that conversation requires documentation, a history, a pattern, a record of repayment stretching back far enough to prove you are the kind of person who pays. Your history is 8 years long and completely invisible. because it was filed under someone else's name the entire time, which is basically what happens when you let your boyfriend hold the Netflix password, except the password is your entire financial existence, and the streaming service is the American banking system. You didn't borrow, he borrowed, you repaid. The distinction to the institution is everything. What the bank actually sees when you walk in is straightforward. There's no file, there's nothing to pull. The loan officer, not Mr. Hartley this time, a different one, same expression, flips through a folder and finds you largely theoretical. You exist as a depositor. As a credit applicant, you are, essentially, new. A new borrower with no history, one income, and dependence is what the underwriting guidelines call a risk. The guidelines don't call it anything else. They don't need to, so you build. Slowly. A small department store account that requires a $50 deposit to open. A layaway plan at Goldblatt's for a winter coat, not credit, exactly, but a payment schedule, which is the closest available facsimile. A neighbour named Dolores, short, watchful, and reliably affronted by institutions, works at a currency exchange and tells you, without ceremony, that you should keep every receipt from every payment you have ever made in a shoebox, because no one is going to remember on your behalf. You keep the shoebox. The shoebox is doing more financial work than any document in your life. Meanwhile, the installment plans from the previous segment are still running. The washing machine is being paid off at a rate that includes enough interest to have bought a second washing machine by the time you're done. The total cost of the machine, once the final coupon is clipped, will be somewhere between what a machine costs and what a machine costs if it were also a small personal loan from someone who doesn't particularly like you. You knew this going in. You signed anyway, because the alternative was the laundromat, and the laundromat is 12 blocks away, and you have a toddler, and it is February in Chicago. A woman named Patricia, who lives in the unit above yours and has been divorced since 1952, tells you over coffee that she applied for a Sears charge account 4 times before they approved her, and only then because her brother co-signed, which she describes as the most expensive cup of coffee she's ever bought, because now her brother feels he has a position on her financial decisions. He does not have a position. She didn't ask for one. The form created it. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act doesn't pass until 1974. You don't know this because it hasn't happened yet, and because no one is announcing the arrival date. You know only the present tense. You are creditworthy in proportion to how long you can wait. Every month you pay on time is a month added to a record that doesn't officially exist yet. You are writing your own file in pencil, on paper no one is collecting, hoping that eventually someone will ask to see it. You put the Marshall Fields letter in the shoebox, too. Not for any practical reason, it just seems like something that should be witnessed. You sign a contract at Sears on a Thursday afternoon for a Kenmore washing machine because the laundromat costs 40 cents a load and you have 3 children and a baby. The salesman walks you through the payment schedule with a yellow pencil and a printed form. $12 down, $8 a month for 36 months. The total at the bottom of the page is more than 3 times the price written on the showroom floor. He calls it convenience. You sign on the line, he indicates. The machine will be delivered next Tuesday between 9 and 4. The interest rate is not printed in a large font. It is not printed in the paragraph he read aloud. It is in the lower portion of the page, in a typeface that assumes you are not going to read that far. The annual rate is 31%, which is basically a payday loan with a rinse cycle, which the form does not call 31%. It calls it a carrying charge. A carrying charge is a phrase that has been professionally designed to feel like a minor inconvenience rather than what it actually is, which is an additional washing machine paid over time as a fee for the first washing machine. The Tuesday delivery window is 9 to 4, 7 hours. You work 9 to 5. You call your supervisor at Keystone Insurance on Friday morning and ask if you can come in at noon. She tells you that's not how it works, and then she pauses just long enough for you to understand the pause, and then she says she hopes everything is all right at home. You take a personal day. It costs you $7.20 in wages. The delivery men arrive at 3:45. One of them tracks road salt across the kitchen floor. The machine itself is white, heavy, and uniformly pleased with itself, and it hums with a low institutional confidence. It costs you nothing extra to admire it. It is going to save you roughly 80 cents a week at the laundromat, assuming you use it twice a week. which means it is going to save you about $40 a year. At $8 a month, you are paying $96 a year for a machine that saves you $40. The math is doing something. It is not doing anything in your favor. A neighbor named Gerald, Patricia's co-signer from upstairs, who now apparently considers himself a stakeholder in the building's financial decisions, mentions at the mailboxes that he got his RCA refrigerator on installment too back in '52. He says it worked out fine. You say that's good. He nods with the deep satisfaction of a man who has never had to calculate whether a carrying charge fits inside what's left after rent and powdered milk and the 2 aspirin you crushed into orange juice last Tuesday because the doctor's visit was $3 and that was 4 hours of typing. He nods for a while. You collect your mail, miss one payment and the contract allows repossession of the machine, at which point you also forfeit all prior payments. This is in the document. It is in the lower portion of the document, in the same helpful typeface as the carrying charge. There is no provision for explaining to the contract that your hours were cut in March. The contract has a repossession clause. The repossession clause has never once expressed curiosity about your circumstances. The machine hums on Tuesday nights while the children sleep. It is genuinely useful. It does the thing it was sold to do, and it does it without complaint, which is more than you can say for the carrying charge. You stand in the kitchen at 10:15 and listen to it run through its cycle, and you think about the total at the bottom of the page, and then you stop thinking about it because there is nothing to be done with that information tonight. The machine spins. The debt accumulates. Both of them are patient. You sit in a folding chair in a county welfare office on the 3rd floor of a building on Randolph Street and fill out a 6-page application for aid to dependent children. The pages ask for your husband's name, his last known address, his employer, the date of separation, the cause of separation, the date of the last support payment, the date of the next expected payment, the names and ages of every person sleeping in your residence, and a list of male relatives living within a 50-mile radius. Page 2 asks whether you have attempted to locate your husband through a court of law. You have. Page 2 does not ask what the court said. You already know what the court said, which was essentially nothing. Issued in triplicate, filed in a drawer. A clerk named Mrs. Dunbar sits behind the counter in a cardigan the colour of a filing cabinet, grey, sensible, and quietly thorough, and does not look up when you slide the application back across the desk. She reads it the way someone reads a train schedule, not to understand it, but to confirm it contains the right number of columns. She turns to page 4. She turns back to page 2. She puts a small pencil mark next to the line where you've written your employer and your weekly income, which is $35, which Mrs. Dunbar will now compare against the county's income ceiling for assistance eligibility without telling you what that ceiling is. The income ceiling is not a ceiling, it's a trapdoor. In 1958, the maximum monthly benefit for a mother with 3 children in most states is about $120, 40 to 50 of those for food. If your wages push you above the eligibility line, you receive nothing. If your wages keep you below it, you receive $120 and the ongoing company of Mrs. Dunbar. Page 5 asks about your household's assets. You list the contents of the apartment: a second-hand sofa, a Kenmore washing machine with 22 monthly payments remaining, a General Electric refrigerator that belonged to the previous tenant and technically still does, and 3 winter coats. Page 5 has a line for automobiles. You leave it blank. There is no line for what the washing machine is actually costing you per year, because that number would complicate the column Mrs. Dunbar is currently running in pencil on the back of a manila folder. Page 6 is the home visit authorization. You sign it to confirm that a county caseworker may visit your residence at any hour, announced or unannounced, to verify the accuracy of your application. The form phrases this as a courtesy. The form phrases everything as a courtesy. What it means is that someone will arrive at 6 in the morning, possibly on a Tuesday, and open your closets. The caseworker is looking for evidence of a man, a second toothbrush, a pair of work boots, a shaving kit on the bathroom shelf. If she finds one, your case is closed, not reduced. Closed. The form has a checkbox for this. The checkbox is already printed. Mrs. Dunbar opens the hall closet first. She lifts a wool coat off its hanger, checks the inside collar for size, replaces it. She does this with the unhurried efficiency of someone who has opened a great many closets. The caseworker's report doesn't have a field for context. It has checkboxes. Mrs. Dunbar stamps your application received and slides a carbon copy across the counter. Processing takes 4 to 6 weeks. There is no number to call during those 4 to 6 weeks. There is a window on the 3rd floor of a building on Randolph Street, and the window is open on weekdays between 9 and 4, excluding the 2nd Tuesday of each month, which is listed on a handwritten sign taped to the glass at a slight angle, as if even the sign is uncertain about this. You fold your carbon copy and put it in your coat pocket next to a grocery receipt and a mitten belonging to your youngest, which you've been carrying since October. Outside, the elevator is out of service. You take the stairs. You hear the knock at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning before the children are awake. You open the door in your bathrobe with one hand still on the chain. The woman in the grey coat introduces herself by her last name and says she is here for the home visit. She steps inside before you respond. She glances into the bathroom. She glances into the kitchen. She opens the closet by the front door. She is checking for shoes, for a coat, for any sign that a man has been in this apartment overnight. The authorization for this visit is on page 6 of the application you signed. You signed page 6. You signed all the pages. You needed the $120. She's not looking for disqualifying income. She's not looking for evidence of fraud. She's looking for a second pair of shoes near the door, a razor on the bathroom shelf, a coat in a size that isn't yours hanging next to your winter wool. The man in the house rule doesn't require a man. It requires the suggestion of one. Mrs. Pratt, grey coat, clipboard, expression of someone who has done this 400 times and finds it neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just scheduled, opens the closet a second time. The clipboard has opinions about Sundays and Tuesdays and the angles at which a coat ought to hang. She is brisk, thorough, and reliably disappointed. The closet is aware of this. If she finds anything she decides is evidence, the case closes. Not after a hearing, not after an appeal. The case closes, and the $120 stops, and the $40 of that which went to food stops with it. You can reapply. The reapplication takes 6 weeks. You have roughly $11 and a paper sack of powdered milk, which is chalky and faintly sour in a way your youngest has stopped complaining about because complaining didn't change anything. The visit is supposed to happen every 90 days. In practice, it can happen any morning. There is no advance notice required. There is no warrant required. This is basically a surprise Airbnb inspection, except the host is the federal government and the rating is your right to feed your children. Mrs. Pratt writes something on the clipboard. You watch her write it. You don't ask what it says because you've learned that asking changes the temperature of the room in a way that doesn't benefit you. She asks if anyone else contributes to the household. You say no. She writes that down too. She asks if you've had any male visitors in the past month. The question has a correct answer. You give it. She closes the clipboard. She says she'll be back in the spring. She means this as information, not a threat. She leaves, and you close the door, and you stand in the kitchen for a moment while the apartment reconfigures itself back into a place you live in rather than a place being inspected. The children are starting to stir. You hear the oldest one moving around in the back room. You put water on. The powdered milk goes into a cup and you stir it until it stops looking like powder and starts looking like milk, which is not the same thing as tasting like milk. Your youngest drinks it anyway. She is 4 and has no strong opinions about dairy sourcing. By 1958, this visit structure exists in 31 states in some form. Louisiana uses it, that same year, to build the evidentiary basis for its suitable home law, which in 1960 will remove roughly 23,000 children from ADC rolls, almost entirely black children, on the grounds that their mothers' households do not meet moral character standards. The suitable home law does not define suitable. The caseworker decides. The clipboard decides. You are called back to the welfare office on a Thursday because your file has been flagged for a suitability review. The caseworker is a different woman this time, younger, with a clipboard. She has a folder in front of her with notes in handwriting you have never seen. She asks about the man who walked you home from the bus stop on October 14th. She asks about the cousin who slept on the couch in December. She asks whether the children attend Sunday school. She asks whether you keep liquor in the apartment. She writes down each of your answers. The folder is thick. You don't know who assembled it. You don't know who reported the man at the bus stop, or whether the cousin's name came from a neighbour, or from your previous intake form, or from somewhere else entirely. The folder doesn't say. The folder just sits there between you, with its corners squared and its paper clips straight, radiating a bureaucratic confidence that it knows more about your life than you do. The folder is neat, level, and quietly authoritative in ways the women who fed it never were. The review process has a rubric. Morally suitable means different things in different counties, but the common thread is this. You must appear to be living without male companionship, without alcohol, without financial irregularities, and without opinions about any of the above. A caseworker in Illinois might flag a stack of empty beer bottles left by a plumber who fixed your sink in March. A caseworker in Georgia might cite a neighbor's testimony that a male voice was heard through the wall on a Wednesday evening. The male voice was the radio. The radio had a man on it. The notes in the folder come from neighbors who are doing their civic duty by listening through walls. If the review goes badly, your case closes. Not paused, closed. The maximum monthly benefit for a mother with 3 children in 1958 is about $120, 40 to 50 of which goes to food. The caseworker doesn't call it taking. She writes the word determination on the line. Rita, the caseworker before this one, short, careful, and reliably warm, used to bring hard candies for the children and ask about your hours before she asked about anything else. This caseworker doesn't bring candies. She adjusts the folder once and asks whether you have had any male visitors in the last 90 days. You tell her about the landlord, who came to fix the radiator in February. She writes that down too. The radiator has now appeared in your permanent record. The folder gets thicker depending on who you are. A widow's folder is thin. A divorced woman's folder is thicker, and the caseworker sits closer to the desk. An unmarried mother's folder is the fattest, and it's been read by more people than you'll ever meet. Louisiana made this arithmetic explicit in 1960, when the suitable home law removed roughly 23,000 children from ADC rolls, nearly all of them black, on grounds of the mother's moral character. You answer the questions. You do not say that October 14th was a Tuesday and the man was your building super-checking whether your back staircase lock had been repaired. You don't say this because correcting the record is not the same as clearing it, and you've been in this office enough times to understand the difference. The caseworker makes a note. She closes the folder. She tells you someone will be in touch regarding the determination. The determination takes 11 days. The check is not late. The check is simply absent while the determination is pending, which is a different thing, administratively speaking. You have powdered milk, half a box of cornmeal, and $4.30. The children don't know about the determination. They know about the cornmeal. You leave the office at 2:10. The bus stop is 4 blocks away, and the stroller wheel has been pulling left since January. The folder stays behind. It will be there the next time, with new handwriting and a new paperclip, squared at the corners, waiting. You stand in line on the second Saturday of the month behind a folding table set up in the basement of a Methodist church on the corner. A man in a white apron weighs out portions onto wax paper, powdered milk in a paper sack, government cheese in a 5-pound brick, canned pork in olive drab tins with a small key soldered to the lid, a bag of yellow cornmeal. You sign the ledger. You carry the cardboard box up the basement steps to the bus stop. The cheese is heavy. The milk smells faintly sour through the paper before you have opened it. The whole box is basically a HelloFresh kit, except every ingredient is beige, and the chef is the Department of Agriculture. The cornmeal in the sack is the cornmeal the Department of Agriculture couldn't move. The cheese in the brick is the cheese nobody bought. The man with the scale and the wax paper weighs each portion the same way every time. Same scoop, same fold, same pencil mark in the ledger. The cheese is its own subject, dense, waxy, and uniformly unimpressed. It arrives in a block the colour of a school bus, and it does not behave the way cheese behaves. It doesn't slice cleanly. It doesn't melt so much as pool. It has the structural ambitions of concrete and the flavour profile of something that once knew a cow. You will find uses for it, because you will find uses for everything. But you will never stop being surprised by it. The powdered milk is the harder problem. You mix it with water in a tin pitcher, and the result is a liquid that is technically milk in the same way that a photograph of a window is technically a view. It's chalky. It's faintly sour in a way that doesn't go away. Your daughter, who is 4, drinks it without complaint because she doesn't know yet that there's another kind. That's the part that stays with you, later. Not the taste, the not knowing. The bus stop is half a mile from the apartment. The cardboard box is not designed for weather. Margaret Oakes, a woman you've seen in this line 3 Saturdays running, 2 kids, one broken umbrella held together with a rubber band, nods at you from the next bench over. She tucks the cornmeal bag under her coat. She doesn't explain. It's the sensible thing to do, so she does it. The bus takes 11 minutes when it's on time and longer when it isn't, and it's February, and the toddler she has propped against her hip is wearing one mitten and regarding the world with the expression of someone who has filed a formal complaint and is awaiting a response. The canned pork opens with the small soldered key, which is a system that sounds straightforward until the key snaps on the third turn, which it does at least once a month. There's no backup method. The tin is too thick for a standard can opener. There is a woman on your floor who has a method involving a butter knife and the edge of the counter, and she will show you, once, and after that you're on your own. The pork itself is fine. Not bad. Not good. Present. By the time you get home, the box has softened at one corner where the cheese moisture has worked through the cardboard. You set it on the kitchen table. You look at it. This is approximately 4 days of food, stretched, for you and the child, assuming the cornmeal goes into everything and the cheese gets rationed across meals that don't advertise what they are. You have done this math before. You will do it again. The math is not complicated. It is just relentless. There's a woman 2 blocks over. You don't know her name, only that she has 3 children and walks past the church without going in, because going in means your name is in the ledger, and her sister lives in the same county as her caseworker, and she has decided that the ledger is a risk she can't afford this month, so she doesn't go in. She walks past. You watch her through the basement window from the table with the wax paper, and you sign your name, and you take the cheese, and neither of you says anything about it. You sit at the kitchen table on the first of the month with a pencil and a piece of yellow legal pad paper and plan the week's meals. $40 must cover 4 people for 31 days. You write down beans on Monday, beans and rice on Tuesday, a small pot roast you will buy on Friday for the weekend. The government cheese will go into a casserole on Wednesday. The powdered milk will go into the children's cereal every morning. You add the column at the bottom. You erase one of the casseroles and write beans again. The $40 is what remains after rent, after the utility minimums, after the bus fare. It is what the ADC calculation has determined a mother of 3 requires to feed those 3 children for 1 calendar month. The number was not arrived at carelessly. Someone sat in an office in 1953 and worked it out on paper, the same way you're working it out now, except their paper was official and yours is yellow and slightly damp from where your coffee cup was sitting. The difference is that their number became policy and yours becomes dinner. $40 buys dried beans, are cheap and filling and taste like whatever you put near them, which in your kitchen is usually salt and patience. Rice stretches, cornmeal stretches further. Government cheese melts if you apply enough heat and faith. The powdered milk is chalky and faintly sour, and the children drink it because they're thirsty, not because they like it. Nobody likes it. The milk has opinions about being reconstituted, and it expresses those opinions in texture. Friday's pot roast is the week's event, not an indulgence, an event. You buy the cheapest cut, the one that requires 3 hours of oven time to become chewable, and you plan the whole week around it the way a project manager plans a product launch, except the product is a piece of meat the size of your hand, and the launch is Sunday lunch. The bones go back into a pot on Monday. The pot makes broth. The broth goes into the beans. This is not a recipe, it's arithmetic. A caseworker named Mrs. Pullman, short, watchful, and reliably affronted, stopped by last month on a Tuesday. Not announced, not scheduled. Just a knock at 7:15 in the morning while the youngest was still in pyjamas. Mrs. Pullman stood in your kitchen and looked at the shelves. She wrote something on her clipboard. She asked if you were seeing anyone. The word seeing doing a lot of diplomatic work in that sentence. You said no. She wrote something else. She thanked you and left. The casserole was on the stove. She did not ask about the casserole. The $120 monthly benefit is what it's called. The $40 that goes to food is what's left after the rent ceiling the program acknowledges, which is not your actual rent, and the utility allowance, which is not your actual utilities. The gap between the benefit ceiling and your actual costs is yours to solve, alone, in pencil, at this table. Of course, there are things the budget doesn't include. A doctor's visit is $3, which is 4 hours at the typewriter on a good week. When the middle child had an ear infection in February, you dropped warm oil into the ear canal and crushed an aspirin into a teaspoon of orange juice and watched her for 2 days. She recovered. You recorded nothing. If you'd recorded it, someone might have asked why you hadn't taken her to a doctor, and that question leads to other questions, and those questions lead to Mrs. Pullman's clipboard. The Benjamin Spock book is on the shelf. Someone gave it to you when the first child was born. It sells 750,000 copies a year and addresses itself warmly and completely to couples. There's a whole chapter on how the father can help with nighttime feedings. You've read that chapter. You've read it more than once. It's very thorough. By the third week of the month, the pot roast is long gone, and the column on the yellow paper has run out of room. You turn it over. You write beans on Monday. You write beans on Tuesday. You look at Wednesday for a long moment. The pencil knows what you're about to write. You keep the children out of the public pool for the entire month of August, because the polio case count has climbed to 4 in your zip code and the morning radio has stopped reading the names. The pool is the only place they can be cool. The apartment is on the 3rd floor and faces west and holds the heat past midnight. You set a fan in the window. You buy a watermelon at the corner stand for 30 cents. You read them a book at 4 in the afternoon. You check their foreheads every 2 hours. Polio doesn't have a treatment. It has an outcome. Either the child recovers, or the child doesn't, or the child recovers into something that requires equipment your insurance won't cover because you don't have insurance. A doctor's visit is $3, which is 4 hours of typing, which is money that was already spoken for before you sat down at the typewriter. So you watch. You check. You run your hand along the back of a small neck and try to remember what normal feels like. The Salk vaccine is approved in April 1955. There's a national celebration. President Eisenhower thanks Jonas Salk on live television. School children receive their shots in gymnasium lines with the orderly relief of a country that has been genuinely terrified for a decade. This is the good news. The follow-up news, which does not make the front page, is that vaccine distribution moves through school programs and pediatrician offices and public health departments that are not evenly funded, not evenly staffed, and not open on the 2 days a week you don't have to be at work. You call the health department. You are put on a list. The list is real. The list has your name on it. The list does not have a date. 2. Fear costs money. If one of your children contracts polio and requires hospitalization, the average stay runs 6 to 8 weeks. The average cost runs well past what you earn in a year. There is no Medicaid yet. That doesn't exist until 1965, which is 10 years away and might as well be a foreign country. There are charity wards which exist, and waiting lists for charity wards which are longer. A caseworker named Agnes, neat, level, and quietly thorough, the one who always holds her clipboard at a slight inward angle, like she's guarding a secret, can, in theory, authorize emergency medical assistance. In practice, Agnes has 47 cases and a manual that is 200 pages long and written entirely in the passive voice. So you manage the fear the way you manage everything else. You do it yourself. You keep them out of the pool. You keep them away from the movie theatre in July and August, which is the only air-conditioned room within walking distance and which costs 15 cents a ticket. You keep them in the apartment with the fan and the watermelon and the book you've read 11 times. The children are hot. They are bored in the specific way that children are bored when they can see the thing they want from the window. You tell them the pool is closed. It isn't closed. It just can't be their pool this summer. Doctor. Spock's book is on the shelf, the one that sold 750,000 copies a year and addressed itself, on every page, to both parents in a 2-income household. It has good advice about fevers. It has nothing to say about the specific calculation of whether you can afford to find out if the fever is the fever or something else. That calculation isn't in any book. You've worked it out yourself, in your head, at 2 in the morning, with the fan running and a child asleep on either side of you, because the apartment is 1 bedroom and the heat doesn't care about that. The foreheads are cool by morning. They always are. You make breakfast. You check again anyway. You wake at 1 in the morning because your son is crying with an ear infection. You go to the kitchen and set a small pan of olive oil on the lowest flame the stove will hold. The doctor visit is $3. You have $1.20 in your purse until Friday. You wait for the oil to warm. You test it on the inside of your wrist. You carry the pan and a folded clean handkerchief back down the hall to the bedroom. He has cried like this before. So have you. The oil goes into the ear canal with a dropper you've rinsed and dried and kept in the kitchen drawer since last winter. You tilt his head. You hold it there. He quiets, not because the pain has stopped, but because something warm is happening, and warmth is a kind of answer even when it isn't a cure. You've also crushed half an aspirin into a spoonful of orange juice. He makes a face. The face is a good sign. He's well enough to have opinions. The $3 is not $3. It's Thursday morning at 7:15, standing at the payphone outside the pharmacy because you don't have a home line, waiting for the pediatric office to open, doing the arithmetic out loud to yourself because the arithmetic won't stop. $3 is 4 hours of typing. It's the bus fare for 8 days. It's the difference between the gas bill being short and the gas being off. The doctor doesn't negotiate. The doctor has a receptionist who has a clipboard and a policy, and the policy has a very clear position on payment at time of service. Medicaid doesn't exist yet. That happens in 1965, which is not now, and does not help you on a Thursday in 1957. What exists now is the charity ward at county, which exists the way a waiting room exists, technically present, not particularly comfortable, open to the public in the way a highway median is open to the public. You've been there once. You sat for 6 hours next to a woman with a baby in a paper bag, and neither of you said anything because there wasn't anything to say that the waiting room didn't already know. A neighbour named Dottie Purcell, 2 doors down, small, brisk, and reliably unflappable, keeps a bottle of children's aspirin and a heating pad, and has mentioned more than once that you can knock. You have knocked twice. The second time she answered in her housecoat and didn't make you feel the way knocking at 1 a.m. usually makes you feel, which is the specific feeling of a person who has run out of other options. Dottie doesn't ask questions. She hands things through the door gap and goes back to bed. This is a form of generosity that doesn't have a name because the people who name things haven't needed it. By morning, he's cooler. The ear is still tender, but the crying has stopped and he's eaten half a piece of toast and asked where his truck is. The truck is under the bed. You find it and hand it to him, and he makes engine noises into the pillow, and you stand in the doorway watching this, which is the whole report. He's fine. You're fine. The $3 is still $3 and you still don't have it until Friday, but the crisis has a shape now and a shape you can work with. An ear infection caught early is a sick day. An ear infection left 4 days is a burst eardrum, which is a different kind of morning entirely. You already know the difference. You learnt it last March with the middle child on a Sunday with a pillowcase and a basin and Mrs. Callahan on the stoop holding the youngest. The handkerchief goes into the wash. The pan goes back on the stove. The aspirin bottle goes back in the drawer next to the dropper. You've got 40 minutes before you need to start getting him ready for Mrs. Callahan's. You sit down at the kitchen table with the last of the coffee and the arithmetic starts again, the way it always does, patient as anything, right where you left it. You stand at the wall phone in the kitchen at 7:50 in the morning and dial the school office to say your daughter has a fever. The secretary answers on the 3rd ring and asks the date and the spelling of the last name. She asks how long the daughter will be out. She asks whether you have arranged for someone to look in on her during the day. The question is procedural. You say, yes. There is no one. You will make a second phone call after this one and a third one after that. The second call is to your supervisor at the insurance office on Michigan Avenue. You rehearse the sentence on the way to the phone. You've rehearsed it before. The version you say out loud is calm and brief and contains the word unfortunately, which is doing a lot of structural work. Your supervisor does not say you're fired. He says he hopes she feels better soon, in the tone of a man who is already mentally redistributing your workload. You hang up and stand at the phone for a moment. You earn $38 a week before deductions. Each day you don't work is $7.60 you don't have. The fever has been running since yesterday evening. A day out is optimistic. 2 days is more honest. 3 days is the number you don't say out loud in the kitchen, because saying it makes it a budget problem, and right now it's still just a sick child, and you'd like to keep it that way for another 10 minutes. The third call is to Dottie Purcell next door, who helped with the ear last night and who has her own children home for the summer. Dottie picks up on the second ring and says, of course, in the voice of someone who has already said of course several times this month and is keeping track in no particular way. You write her name on the notepad by the phone as if confirming an appointment. The notepad has your daughter's name on it, your supervisor's extension, and a number for the pharmacy that you haven't called yet but will. You have a sick child, a missed shift, a neighbour absorbing a piece of your emergency, and a bottle of aspirin that is 3/4 empty. The aspirin is generic. The bottle cost 39 cents. You bought it in October and have been using it for everything that costs more than 39 cents to treat properly, which is most things. Meanwhile, Benjamin Spock's baby and childcare sits on the shelf above the toaster, spine cracked, pages warped from the steam. It sells 750,000 copies a year. It addresses itself entirely to couples, using the word "we" with the confidence of a document that has never considered the possibility of a different arrangement. The chapter on illness describes a situation in which one parent stays home and the other parent calls from work to check in. The phone in that chapter has a different tone than yours. A social worker named Mrs. Haverstock left a card under your door last Tuesday. She is brisk, watchful, and aggressively scheduled in ways the schedule itself cannot predict. She visits on an irregular schedule and at irregular hours, which is the official structure of the program, and not, she would tell you, anything personal. The card itself has opinions about Tuesdays. It sits on the kitchen counter with the structural patience of a document that is in no hurry to clarify itself. The card says she'll follow up next week. It doesn't say which day. It doesn't say which hour. Your daughter knows to answer the door politely, and not to mention the card. She is 7. She has learned several things this year that 7-year-olds in the houses on Elm Drive probably haven't. She learned them the way you learn things in this apartment, not from a book, but from what happens when you don't already know. You check the aspirin. You check the thermometer. You check the clock, which says 8:15, which means the bus to Michigan Avenue left 4 minutes ago, which means the shift is already gone, and the $7.60 is already a historical fact. You write it in the notebook column on the right side, the column that doesn't have a name because naming it makes it permanent. Your daughter calls from the bedroom. Her voice is smaller than usual and has that particular quality of a child who has decided to be brave about it, which is harder to hear than crying. You put the aspirin in your pocket, fill a glass of water, and go down the hall. The notepad stays on the counter. The column on the right doesn't get any shorter by you looking at it. The school office will call again on Thursday to ask about a return date. You'll say Friday and mean it when you say it. You take the night shift job at the telephone exchange because it pays 80 cents an hour instead of 60, and the supervisor has agreed to let you sit at the back board where the lines are slower. The shift runs from 11 to 7. The sitter charges $5 a night and lives 1 floor below you in the building. You hand the children to her at 10:40 with a kiss and a paper sack of pajamas. You walk 8 blocks to the exchange. You sit at a board with 300 lights on it. Let's talk about the sitter's hourly rate. It's not a wage. It's a tax on showing up to work at all. 80 cents times 8 hours is $6.40. Minus $5 for the sitter leaves $1.40. $1.40 is what the night shift pays after the night shift is paid for. The exchange doesn't see it that way. The exchange sees $6.40. The exchange is not wrong exactly. It's just doing a different calculation than you are. The board lights up. A light means someone needs to be connected to somewhere else. You plug in. You say the number. You connect them. The cord pulls free. Another light. The backboard is slower, the supervisor said. And he was right. In the way that people are right about things that are still very much happening. By 2 a.m, the board has opinions. It lights up when it wants to. It goes dark when it feels like it. You have learned not to take it personally. Marilyn, at the board next to yours, small, deliberate, and unsentimentally generous, brings hard candy and a wax paper twist and sets it at the edge of your station without comment. She does this every Thursday. You eat the candy. You do not discuss the candy. This is the working arrangement and it functions perfectly. The children are asleep, 1 floor below Mrs. Cardenas, who keeps the radio on low and falls asleep herself in the armchair by 11:15. You know this because you came home early once. You did not mention it. Mrs. Cardenas is $5 a night and does not cancel, which makes her the most reliable infrastructure in your life. That is not an exaggeration. That is the actual ranking. At 6:30, the morning board comes in. They are fresh, and they have had coffee, and they are wearing the kind of expression that belongs to people who slept in a bed. You sign out. You walk 8 blocks back. The city at 7 a.m. smells like exhaust and bread and something metallic coming off the street grates. The particular smell of a city that has been running all night without you, and would have continued running without you, and intends to keep running without you indefinitely. You are not bitter about this. You are tired. You open the apartment door at 7:20. The children are awake. The youngest has found the paper sack of pajamas and is wearing both pairs at once, one over the other, for reasons she will not explain. Mrs. Cardenas is asleep in your armchair with her hands folded in her lap like someone who has been very recently sainted. You take the child out of the double pajamas. You make oatmeal. You do not sit down because if you sit down you will not get up. The $1.40 is already spent. The bus fare was 20 cents each way, so 40 cents round trip, leaving $1 even. Oatmeal costs what it costs. The paper sack cost nothing because you kept it from the last bag of flour. $1 doesn't announce what it can do. It just gets smaller and then it's gone. And you make a note in the margin of the telephone bill, and you pick up the next Thursday shift and you do the math again, in case it comes out differently. It doesn't come out differently. It comes out the same every time, with a precision that should honestly be studied somewhere. You hear a man on the morning radio describe a new study from the World Health Organization. He says the British psychiatrist has found that children separated from their mothers for any portion of the day suffer permanent psychological damage. He says the science is clear. He says the working mother, in the psychiatrist's words, is a form of childhood neglect. You are buttering toast for the children at the counter. You set the knife down on the cutting board. You listen to the rest of the report with your hands at your sides. The psychiatrist's name is John Bowlby. His 1951 WHO report is called Maternal Care and Mental Health. It is 194 pages long. You will never read it. The radio announcer has read approximately none of it either, but he delivers the conclusion with the confidence of a man who has personally conducted the research in his own living room. The conclusion, as he presents it, is that a mother who works is doing something to her children, not for them, to them. The report itself says prolonged institutional deprivation, orphanages, wartime evacuation, years in hospital wards without a caregiver, produces measurable harm. That is the finding. That is the specific population. The radio announcer has broadened this to cover the 45 minutes you spend on a bus to the telephone exchange at 11 p.m. while your children sleep. The distance between wartime orphanage and working mother is considerable. The radio does not mention the distance. Benjamin Spock's Baby and Child Care is on your shelf. You've read most of it. It sold 750,000 copies last year alone and addresses itself to couples, your husband and you, offering advice on feeding schedules and fever management to a household configuration that yours does not match. You find this out slowly, page by page, the way you find most things out. A woman named Dr. Estelle Rampton is being interviewed now, following the radio man. She is brisk, confident, and aggressively certain in ways the original report wasn't. She agrees with Bowlby. She says the evidence is robust. She uses the phrase mother-child bond 4 times in 2 minutes. She does not mention childcare infrastructure, or wages, or the cost of a doctor's visit, which is $3, which is 4 hours of typing. She is not asked about those things. The interview is 4 minutes long and concerns itself entirely with what you are doing wrong. The children are eating toast. The youngest has put jam on her elbow, which she is now examining with scientific interest. She appears undamaged. She appears, in fact, largely indifferent to Bowlby's findings. You pick up the knife and finish buttering. You earn 80 cents an hour. The downstairs sitter is $5 a shift. You net $1.40 on a good night. If you stop working to protect the children from the documented harm of your employment, you net nothing. The rent goes unpaid, and the children experience the permanent psychological damage of being cold. The radio announcer does not raise this. A commercial for Kellogg's cornflakes has begun. The radio itself has opinions about your domestic arrangements, which is rich coming from a small wooden box that runs on a wall socket. A cornflakes commercial features a father in a bathrobe. He pours cereal for 2 children while a woman in a housecoat smiles from across the kitchen island. Everyone is present. Everyone is dry. Nobody took a bus home at 7:20 in the morning. You put the toast on the table. The jam elbow is still being investigated. The radio moves on to the weather. You pull Dr. Spock's Baby and Child Care from the shelf in the living room because your son has a rash on the backs of his knees and you do not know what it is. The book is on page 241 before you find anything that looks similar. The page begins with the sentence, "Your husband should be consulted on any unusual symptom." You read past that line. The next paragraph addresses you and your husband in the second person plural. The book has been on this shelf for 4 years and you have read it backwards twice. The book sold 750,000 copies a year. It addressed itself entirely to couples, the way a dinner party invitation addresses itself to couples, with the assumption that any guest who arrives without one has made a personal error. Dr. Spock is not cruel about it. He simply writes as though the solo reader situation has not occurred to him. In this, he is consistent with most of the institutions you deal with on a weekly basis. The rash. It might be contact dermatitis. It might be eczema. It might be something the book describes on page 312 that requires a doctor's visit. The doctor's visit is $3. $3 is 4 hours of typing, which you will do tomorrow morning starting at 8. Assuming your neighbour Mrs. Palicki takes your son before school. Mrs. Palicki sometimes can't. The rash is probably fine, probably. The alternative is warm oil on the skin, you've read that somewhere, and baby aspirin crushed into orange juice. The orange juice is a luxury, the aspirin is not. You crush it carefully so he doesn't taste the bitterness, which he always tastes anyway and gives you a look about it. A look that is too old for a 4-year-old. He has developed the resting expression of a man reviewing a bill he disagrees with, patient, unimpressed, and entirely prepared to escalate. Medicaid doesn't exist yet. It won't for another 10 years. Between now and then, a doctor's visit costs $3 to $5, which is roughly what a vending machine costs in 1958 money. Not a lot. Unless the vending machine is the only thing standing between your child's ear infection and a week of school absences that cost you a week of wages, the arithmetic always has another layer. You find it every time. Of course, there is always the hospital emergency room. The emergency room operates on the logic of a last resort, specifically yours. You go there when something is clearly wrong in a way that cannot be managed with aspirin and warm oil, and the particular quality of attention you have developed for watching a child sleep. You've gotten good at watching a child sleep. You know the difference between the breathing that means fine and the breathing that means something else. Nobody taught you this. It arrived, like most of your skills, through repetition and mild catastrophe. Somewhere between pages 241 and 312, Dr. Spock includes a section on household stress and its effect on children's immune response. He recommends a calm domestic environment. He recommends a stable father figure. He cites Bowlby. The book cites Bowlby the way a courtroom cites precedent, as though the matter is settled and only needs to be read aloud to conclude the proceedings. You read it. You turn the page. A social worker named Mrs. Gerhardt visited 6 weeks ago, Tuesday, 6:15 a.m., which is a time that only exists for purposes of catching you off guard. The shelf has developed opinions about being inspected, and the form, which has been pre-printed, hole-punched, and prejudged, refuses to consider any of them. She looked at the shelf while she filled out her form. She noted the Spock. She did not note the 3 library books beside it on childhood nutrition, or the folder of school forms, or the pencil case your son decorated with a bird that looks more like a potato. She wrote something. You don't know what. The form has a carbon copy that you don't receive. The rash, by Thursday, is mostly gone. You didn't go to the doctor. You watched it. You turned to page 241 4 more times, reading past the sentence about the husband each time without stopping, the way you read past bus schedules that no longer apply to your route. The book is useful. Parts of it. You've learned which parts. You sit on the floor with the children at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening and watch Father Knows Best on the small black and white set in the corner. The father on the program comes home in a hat and a coat and sets his briefcase on the hall table. The mother in the program asks how his day was. The son in the program has a question about an English assignment. The father takes the question with him into the den and closes the door. Your children watch from the rug. They have already eaten beans and toast. There is no den. By 1955, about 65% of American households have a television set. Every program on it assumes there are 2 parents in the room. Father Knows Best. Leave It to Beaver. Ozzie and Harriet. The fathers arrive home at the same time each evening, in identical hats, identical coats, and identically clean shoes. The mothers are already there, having apparently never left. Nobody on any of these programs discusses rent. Nobody's electricity gets cut. The narrative difficulty of the week is a misunderstanding about a school dance, resolved in 22 minutes before a commercial for Ivory soap. Your children watch the den door close. The youngest one asks why the father is going in there. You say he needs to think. She accepts this. She has the seriousness of a child who has already learned to ask smaller questions. Benjamin Spock's Baby and Childcare sits on your shelf. 750,000 copies a year. Your apartment is one bedroom, and the bathroom door doesn't quite latch. The children go to bed at 8:30. You stay on the floor for a while after the set goes dark, in the specific silence that follows a program that described a life happening somewhere else. A neighbour 2 doors down, Mrs. Paulette Reyes, divorced since 1952, told you once that she stopped watching television on weekday evenings entirely. She said she'd started reading the backs of soup cans instead. She said the soup cans made fewer assumptions about her domestic situation. She wasn't wrong. The schematic doesn't just live on television. It's embedded in the classified ads, which specify adults only. It's in the FHA underwriting manual, which rates a neighbourhood's lending risk partly by the presence of unmarried women, which is basically a Yelp review of your zip code based on your marital status, written by the federal government, filed in triplicate, and used to decide whether a family 4 blocks over qualifies for a mortgage. It's in the structure of the ADC benefit ceiling, which in 1958 provides a mother with 3 children roughly $120 per month. The television would like you to know that this is your own fault for not having a den. The children don't ask why your family doesn't look like the families on the program. Not directly. What they ask is smaller than that. Why doesn't the father on the show ever do the dishes? Why does the mother always already know where everything is? Why does nobody on television eat powdered milk? You tell them the people on television eat whatever the script says. Your youngest nods as if this explains something larger than you intended. The set is off now. The room is the same room it was before 7:30. The dishes are where you left them. The rent is what it was this morning. Somewhere across town, another television goes dark in another room where the floor plan doesn't match the program, and a woman sits in the silence after, and the silence doesn't have a sponsored message. You sit in the second row at the parent-teacher conference because you have come straight from the typing pool and the first row is reserved for couples. The teacher, a young woman in a navy blue suit and a small gold pin that catches the fluorescent light every time she nods, which is more often than necessary, opens a manila folder with your son's name written on the tab. She talks about his reading. She talks about his behaviour at recess. She pauses, glances at the empty chair beside you, and asks whether your husband will be joining you tonight. You say no. She makes a small notation in the folder. The conference continues. The notation doesn't say anything alarming. It probably says something like mother only or father absent, a phrase with all the clinical warmth of a tire gauge reading. Let's talk about what the school actually sees. It sees a boy who reads at grade level, keeps his hands to himself most of the time, and once cried at recess because a classmate said something about fathers. The teacher noted the recess incident too. She framed it as a socialization concern. In 1957, a boy without a visible father in the building on parent-teacher night is not a logistical problem. He's a developmental hypothesis. Missus. Garvey, the school counsellor, compact, watchful, and reliably grave, carries a legal pad like it's a shield, and has already left a note in your son's file suggesting he might benefit from the Big Brothers program. The note uses the word structure 4 times. You count them. The note does not ask what your structure looks like. It does not ask about the homework routine, or the Sunday reading hour, or the fact that you've been doing long division with him at the kitchen table every Thursday night since 2nd grade, after the dishes and before the work you brought home in your bag. The legal pad has no page for Thursday nights. Now, here's where it gets specific. John Bowlby's 1951 WHO report, the one claiming that working mothers cause measurable psychological damage to their children, has been cited in enough academic journals by 1957 that it's essentially policy folklore. Teachers read summaries of summaries. Counsellors cite it without having read it. It is at this point less a scientific document and more a weather system. Everyone knows it's overhead, nobody checks the original data, and it makes everything slightly damp. The teacher wraps up the conference by handing you a mimeographed sheet about the spring talent show. She smiles. The smile is genuine. She also slides a brochure across the desk about a program for children from disrupted households, which is apparently what yours is called now, disrupted. As if a husband left and the house tilted on its foundation. You walk back to the parking lot, except you don't have a car, So you walk to the bus stop, which is 3 blocks from the school and does not have a bench. It's March. The sidewalk still has road salt on it from February, ground into a pale crust along the edge. Your coat is wool, and the wool is damp from the bus ride over, and damp wool in March has a smell that is less inclement weather and more the inside of a decision you made. You wait 11 minutes. The bus is not late. You are just early from walking fast. Mr. Delray, who teaches 4th grade and saw you waiting at the stop, offers a ride as far as Elm Street. He means it kindly. He also mentions, unprompted, that his wife thinks the talent show should have a square dancing component. You nod. You have been nodding since 6:15. Nodding is, at this point, structural. You get home at 8:40. Your son is asleep. Your neighbour, Mrs. Greer, who watched him for the evening and accepts 50 cents for it, is sitting at your kitchen table with a cup of tea she made from your things. She tells you he ate his dinner. She tells you he asked when you'd be back. She tells you he fell asleep with his shoes on, which she took off. She leaves the 50 cents on the table. You don't argue. She closes the door behind her with the careful quiet of someone who understands that the apartment has a sleeping child in it and very thin walls. The folder goes back to school tomorrow. Your son will sit in his row. The notation will remain in the cabinet. And the spring talent show brochure will go into the kitchen drawer underneath the electric bill and the January receipt from the installment plan on the washing machine, which has 3 more years of payments at a rate the salesman called competitive. You walk into St. Bridget's at 10:15 on Sunday morning with the children in their school shoes and slide into the second-to-last pew on the left. The widows sit at the front near the altar. The intact families sit in the middle rows. The divorced women, of whom there are 4 in this parish counting you, sit at the back near the holy water font. The pastor nods at you on the way in. He has nodded at you for 3 years. He has not yet visited the apartment, although he visits the widows on Wednesdays. The widows get the casseroles. This is not a theological position. It's closer to a zoning ordinance. A widow is a woman tragedy happened to. A divorced woman is a woman something went wrong inside of. The casseroles know the difference, and they travel accordingly. Mrs. Paluska in the 3rd pew gets a tuna noodle every other Tuesday. You get a nod. The nod is sincere. The nod is all there is. The 4 of you, the back pew women, are not a category St. Bridget's has language for. Vera Kowalski, divorced 2 years, works the early shift at the telephone exchange and smells faintly of switchboard grease, metallic, persistent, and quietly democratic about which pew it follows her into, despite her best efforts. Rosa Mendez, whose husband left for Pittsburgh and didn't leave a forwarding address, sits with 6-year-old twins who are currently fighting over a hymnal with the quiet determination of contract negotiators. Dorothy Finn, who doesn't discuss the divorce, sits perfectly still and holds her purse with both hands like it might run. And you, 4 women, 1 font. The holy water doesn't care. It's the one institution in this building that doesn't. The back pew isn't a seat, it's a verdict. You're close enough to God to count as attending. You're far enough from the altar that your presence doesn't unsettle anything. The children fidget. You produce a buttermint from your coat pocket, the kind that comes in a cellophane twist and has been in that pocket since at least November. It does its job. The younger one chews it like a small, contented animal. The older one stares at the family 2 rows up, at the father in the good grey suit, at the way he puts his arm around his wife without looking, the way a person touches something they assume will always be there. After Mass, the parish hall opens for coffee. Father Donnelly, a wide man with an affinity for butter cookies and organised seating, circulates through the room in a pattern that is not random. He lands at the young families first, then the Knights of Columbus table, then the widows, briefly, warmly. The back pew women get a pass-through, not an intentional snub, more like a route that just happens to angle away at the last moment, every single Sunday, with the consistency of a bus that knows exactly which stops to skip. The bulletin has opinions about who lives where and with whom, opinions it expresses through the consistent omission of any household that doesn't include a husband. The parish bulletin for this week contains a reminder about the Family Life Committee dinner, a notice about the men's club golf outing, and an announcement for the mother-daughter tea hosted by the Altar Society. The Family Life Committee bulletin features a drawing of a nuclear family, father, mother, 2 children, a dog, that appears to have been printed sometime around 1948 and has been running ever since on the assumption that its audience hasn't changed. It hasn't occurred to the bulletin that you exist. You take it anyway. The children like the paper for drawing on the back. Vera catches your eye across the coffee urn and makes a small face that means, yes, this again. Vera has been making that face for 2 years and has perfected it to a fine art. A 1/4-inch lift of one eyebrow, a breath through the nose that carries the full weight of institutional indifference without technically expressing anything a pastor could address. You return it. It's the most efficient conversation you'll have all week. You put your cup in the bin and collect the children and button the younger one's coat at the door. Outside, the November air is flat and cold and smells like exhaust from the parking lot where the intact families are loading into their station wagons. You have the bus. It comes in 20 minutes if it comes on time, which is a condition the bus treats as optional. You stand at the corner with the stroller and a child on each side. A woman from the 3rd row drives past in a Buick. She waves from behind glass, warmly, briefly. The car doesn't slow down. You hand the children to Mrs. Kowalski across the hall at 7:20 on Wednesday morning with a paper sack containing 2 sandwiches and an apple cut into wedges. She takes them in her left hand and a cigarette in her right. She does not charge by the hour. She charges in small favours. The dry cleaning you will pick up on Saturday. The carton of Pall Malls you can buy with your office discount. The old Reader's Digest from the doctor's waiting room. The arrangement is basically a Venmo balance, except the balance is in dry cleaning errands and the receipts are in her head. She will ask, by Friday, whether you have heard from your husband. You will not have. Mrs. Kowalski is 61, widowed since 1949, and her apartment smells like cabbage, Jergens lotion, and the specific dignified staleness of an upholstered armchair that has known one occupant for a long time. She watches 4 children in a 2-bedroom unit and calls it visiting. She does not call it work because calling it work would make it something the government might have an opinion about. The arrangement is invisible by design. The Lanham daycare centres, the ones the federal government built and funded during the war so women could work defence jobs, closed almost entirely by the end of 1946. Congress decided peacetime mothers didn't need them. The centres shut in the same season the men came home, which was not a coincidence so much as a policy preference stated through timing rather than paperwork. You were not consulted. The waiting room chairs were still warm. A typist in Chicago in 1955 earning $35 a week might spend 12 to 15 of those dollars on childcare. That leaves $20. The rent is not $20, Mrs. Kowalski takes the dry cleaning and the Pall Malls instead. She lights one off the burner of her gas stove because the matches are in the other room. Of course, there's a scientific framework for why this arrangement makes you a bad mother. John Bowlby's 1951 report for the World Health Organization, Maternal Care and Mental Health, concluded that children separated from their mothers suffered lasting psychological damage. The report was real. The science was real, up to a point. What happened next was that every employer who wanted to pay you less and every magazine editor who wanted to keep you home cited Bowlby the way people cite a terms of service agreement, confidently, without having read it, to end a conversation. The children in Mrs. Kowalski's apartment are fine. The children in Mrs. Kowalski's apartment are eating sandwiches and watching her soap opera and arguing over a wooden puzzle with 3 missing pieces. The damage, apparently, is subtle. Mrs. Kowalski keeps the roster in her head, who dropped off when, who gets picked up early on Tuesdays, whose child can't have peanut butter, and whose child claims this solely to avoid peanut butter. Writing it down would make it a business. On Thursdays, she rebalances the ledger of favours in her head while frying onions. The onions are for nobody. She just likes the smell. Mrs. Kowalski does not appear in the census. The 1.9 million single-mother households counted in 1960 appear as a category. Mrs. Kowalski, who is currently retrieving a wooden puzzle piece from behind her radiator with a knitting needle, does not appear anywhere. Neither does the grandmother 4 blocks over. Neither does the teenager from the 3rd floor. She hands you back a child at 5:50 with a small report. He ate. She didn't. The apple came back in the sack untouched. You file this. You already knew about the apple. She lights another Pall Mall and leans in the doorframe the way someone does when they have one more thing to say and are deciding whether to say it. She decides against. You take the children inside. The door closes. The small favour ledger, which exists in both your heads and nowhere else, carries forward to Thursday. You carry a wicker basket of laundry down 4 flights of stairs at 8 in the morning on Saturday because the building's single washing machine is in the basement and 7 families share it. There is a sign-up sheet taped to the wall above the machine in pencil. You signed up on Wednesday evening for the 8 to 9 slot. Mrs. Carter is already there, folding sheets on the wooden table. She finishes a minute past your start time. You wait. You smile. She does not apologize. You begin to load the machine and count out the right number of nickels. The machine itself is a top loader, with a wringer attachment and a disposition somewhere between a mule and a filing cabinet, stubborn, slow, and reliably ungrateful. It fills slowly. It agitates with real conviction. The rubber wringer has a crack along one edge that catches thin fabric and holds it in a way that feels personal. You feed each item through carefully, because the last time you didn't, it took a sleeve. The sleeve survived. The machine was not sorry. The nickels come to 60 cents in machine fees, not counting the soap. The soap comes in a box with a baby on it, cheerful and clean, which you find slightly aggressive given the circumstances. You ration the powder by eye, enough but not generous, because the box has to last 2 more weeks, and there is no give in the budget for another one before payday. The nickels come from the cup on the kitchen shelf, the one you also pull from for the bus and, occasionally, for the 5-cent banana you bring home on Fridays because the children have started to treat it like a significant event. Saturday is now a second job with no pay and worse hours. While the machine runs, you carry last week's dry laundry back upstairs, fold it on the bed, sort the children's things by who they belong to, and return downstairs before anyone decides your slot ended early. A woman on the 3rd floor named Gloria does this, appears at 9:01, hand on the machine before you finish the rinse cycle, smiling with tremendous sincerity. You've learned to run the last load twice. The wringer is how you dry things, mostly. You don't have a dryer. The building doesn't have a dryer. Some buildings do, but not this one, and you weren't in a position to be selective when you moved in. You string a line across the bathroom and another across the back of the kitchen door, and you hang everything damp and leave the window cracked even in February, because the alternative is mildew, and mildew in a rental means the landlord has a reason to talk to you, and that conversation never ends with anything useful. Mr. Petroselli, who owns the building, stands in the lobby on the 1st of each month with his rent envelope and a small leather notebook. He greets you by your husband's last name. You've corrected him twice. He has nodded twice. The radiator in your unit runs cold on weekends. You've mentioned this. He has nodded a 3rd time. By 10 o'clock, the sheets are through the wringer and hanging in the bathroom in damp, overlapping layers that will take until Sunday evening to dry completely. You refill the machine for the 2nd load. You write the time in pencil next to your name on the sign-up sheet and underline it, not aggressively, just clearly. Downstairs, the single bare bulb throws one shadow. The machine fills. You wait next to it because leaving means someone else's things go in and yours come out wet on the floor, which has happened, and which you handled with more composure than you actually felt. A woman named Dottie Marsh from apartment 2B comes down around 10:15 with a pillowcase full of her husband's work shirts and looks at the machine and then at you and then at the sign-up sheet, in that order. She does the math. She goes back upstairs. This is the closest thing to institutional respect the sign-up sheet can offer, and you'll take it. The laundry takes until noon. You fold everything at the wooden table where Mrs. Carter was folding 3 hours ago, stacking it into the wicker basket in reverse order of the stairs, lightest things on top. You carry it up 4 flights. The children are awake and have eaten the cereal and left the bowls in the sink with a small amount of milk still in them, which is a kind of optimism you don't have time to argue with. Saturday is half over. The machine is someone else's problem now. You step off the bus at the corner of 47th and Wabash at 6:12 in the evening in February with 2 bags of groceries and a toddler on a knit leash. The temperature is 12 degrees. The apartment is half a mile from the bus stop. You shift the bags. You take the toddler's hand. He is wearing a snowsuit and rubber boots that are slightly too small. The snow has been salted, then wet, then frozen again into a grey crust. The brown paper bag in your left hand has begun to tear at the bottom corner. The toddler is not walking so much as orbiting. He veers left toward a fire hydrant wearing a salt-white ring around its base like a crown. He veers right toward a parked Buick with ice on the wheel wells. The knit leash goes taut. You don't pull hard. You pull correctly, which is its own skill, acquired over approximately 600 similar walks. The bag tears a little more. You hold it from underneath with your forearm. Your coat isn't long enough and the wind has found the gap above your waistband. It has opinions about that gap. What's in the bags? The right bag has a box of crackers, a can of tomato soup, a paper sack of dried pinto beans, and a quart of milk. The left bag, the tearing one, has 2 sweet potatoes, a heel of bread, and a small can of pork that cost 39 cents and was on sale. Nothing in either bag required refrigeration before you bought it, because you bought what you could carry, which is what you always buy. You don't own a car? The grocery store with the better produce is 4 blocks past the one you use, which might as well be 4 miles in February with a toddler and a tearing bag. The toddler stops to look at a pigeon. The pigeon doesn't move. They regard each other with equal seriousness. You wait. You have learned that fighting this is more expensive than the 15 seconds it costs. Your arms are full and your fingers are starting to go numb through the wool gloves, the ones with the small hole in the right thumb that you've been meaning to mend since October. A woman passes you going the other direction, coat pressed, shoes clean and aggressively unencumbered, shopping bag handled in the crook of an elbow, husband walking beside her with his hands in his pockets. He isn't carrying anything. That's what hands in pockets means at 6:12 in February. She nods at you in the way that contains an entire sentence you're both pretending isn't there. The bag tears through. You catch the sweet potatoes with your forearm against your coat. One rolls anyway, wobbles 4 inches to the right, and stops. You stand still for a moment. The toddler looks up at you. A taxi goes by on Wabash and throws a small sheet of slush over the curb. It misses you by roughly the width of a good decision. You redistribute. Beans in your coat pocket. Sweet potatoes tucked into the crook of your right elbow with the soup can. The bread, which is already slightly compressed, goes on top of everything and stays there through force of optimism. The toddler has lost interest in the pigeon and is now touching the ice crust with one finger in an exploratory way that suggests the boot is about to go through it. You say his name, he looks up, you keep moving. This is a Tuesday. On Thursday, you'll do it again. On Saturday, there's the laundry. The week doesn't have a slow part. The last block is slightly uphill, which you know because your calves have a reliable relationship with it. The street lamp at the corner of your building flickers in the cold the way it always does in February, like it's considering whether this is worth it. You think, same. You don't say it. The toddler is now dragging one foot in the crust for the texture of it, making a low sound that isn't quite a word. He does this when he's tired. You know all his tired sounds the way you know which stair creaks. By necessity. By repetition. By having no one else to learn them. You get the door. You get the toddler. You get the groceries reorganized across both arms, up 4 stairs down the hall that smells like radiator dust and someone else's dinner. The sweet potatoes made it. The bread did not survive with any dignity. You put it on the counter anyway. Dinner is dinner. You receive a letter from the Federal Housing Administration on a Friday afternoon informing you that your home loan application has been denied. The letter is 2 paragraphs long. It does not list a reason. You have been working at the insurance company for 6 years. You have a savings account with $340 in it. You have a clean rental history and 3 references on the form. You set the letter on the kitchen table. You sit down. You read it twice. The signature at the bottom is from a man whose name you cannot pronounce. The FHA underwriting manual, the one the loan officer is working from, the one you will never see, rates neighborhoods by risk, which is basically a Yelp review of an entire zip code written by the federal government based on the marital status of the women living there. Single women living in them count against the score. Not your credit, not your salary, not your 3 references. The presence of unmarried women in a zip code is itself the problem. The way mold in one corner of a building is understood to be everywhere. Let's talk about what the denial actually means. It means the VA-subsidized ranch houses going up in Cicero and Skokie and Berwyn, the ones with the carports and the storm doors and the yards that seem to go on forever, those are not for you. The federal mortgage subsidy flows in one direction and you are not in it. You rent. You will keep renting. Your landlord knows this, which is why he hasn't fixed the radiator since October. The radiator hisses at night like a small disapproving aunt, patient, persistent, and structurally incapable of letting a subject drop. Mrs. Gallucci down the hall applied for a loan the same month. Her husband Eugene filled out the form. Eugene works at the rail yard and has been there 4 years, which is 2 fewer than you've been at the insurance company. Eugene and Mrs. Scallucci's loan was approved in 11 days. The approval letter was 3 paragraphs. It listed reasons. The bank isn't finished with you yet. You don't have a credit card in your name. When Gerald left, the joint account closed. The account had always been Gerald's account. You understood this in theory. The way you understand that mail addressed to occupant is technically addressed to you. What you didn't understand was that your 7 years of on-time payments left with him. The credit history went in his direction and kept going. You started over at 0 the morning the decree came through, which is basically what happens when someone changes the Netflix password on you, except the password was your entire financial existence and there is no customer support line. A loan officer at First Federal on Michigan Avenue will tell you, if you ask, that you may reapply with a male cosigner. He will say this pleasantly. He will have a pen ready. The pen is the most optimistic thing in the room. You don't have a male cosigner. You have Gerald's forwarding address in Waukegan and a box of his things he hasn't collected yet. The box is in the hall closet. It's been there since March. It's becoming load-bearing. So you go back to the classifieds. 2 bedrooms, 3rd floor, adults only. Adults only means no children, which means not you. 2 bedrooms, near transit, references required. You call. The landlord asks if you're married. You say no. He says the unit has been taken. It was not taken. You call back an hour later and give your neighbour's husband's name and he says there's still availability. You do not pursue this further. You already know where it goes. The letter is still on the kitchen table on Sunday. You haven't moved it because moving it would require deciding what to do with it, and there is nothing to do with it. There is no appeals process listed. There is no second paragraph that says try again, or here is what would change our answer, or we see you've been working at the insurance company for 6 years. The FHA does not leave room for that. The letter just ends, the way a conversation ends when the other person has already left the room and you're still talking to the door. You stand at a wooden table in a courtroom in the Daily Center at 10:15 on a Tuesday morning while your attorney explains to a judge why you are seeking a divorce. The grounds available in Illinois are limited. Adultery, cruelty, desertion, habitual drunkenness. Your attorney has selected cruelty. He describes specific incidents in chronological order. He produces a photograph of a bruise on your forearm taken by a friend the week you left. The judge is reading something else on his desk. He looks up only when the attorney pauses for a response. Every state in the country requires proof of fault, which is basically a TripAdvisor review where you have to prove the hotel was bad, specifically that the proprietor hit you, drank to excess, slept around, or left. There is no version of this where you simply say it isn't working and the state agrees and everyone goes home. You must name what he did. You must describe it with enough specificity that a stranger in a robe finds it credible. The law doesn't ask whether the marriage was finished. The law asks who broke it, and you'd better have documentation. Nevada has a workaround. Nevada has a 6-week residency rule that allows divorce without fault, which is basically the legal equivalent of a spa weekend, except it costs several $100s in train fare plus 6 weeks of lodging in Reno, and you've left your children with your mother in Evanston, and your mother is asking daily when you're coming back. Reno has a small but established industry built entirely around women waiting out their 6 weeks at dude ranches and motor courts, which is less a legal system and more a subscription service for women who can afford to be temporarily Nevadan. You cannot afford to be temporarily Nevadan, so you are here, at this table, with the photograph. The attorney's name is Mr. Halpern. He is efficient, courteous, and uniformly unsurprised by anything that happens in this room. He speaks toward the judge and not toward you, which is correct procedure and also, somehow, accurate to the whole experience. He places the photograph on the bench with both hands, flat, like a man presenting a bill at a restaurant he does not particularly enjoy. The judge picks it up, sets it down, makes a note, does not look at you once during this portion. Of course, the decree, when it comes, will not resolve the question of child support. That's a separate proceeding. The order, when issued, will specify an amount. Whether that amount arrives is a different subject entirely. Within 1 year of a final decree, fewer than half of fathers comply fully with what the order requires. The order has no enforcement mechanism that doesn't require you to return to court with another attorney at another 10:15 on another Tuesday. The order is, in practice, a letter of intent from a man who has already demonstrated his opinion of his obligations. You will get your decree. It will be granted in under 20 minutes. The bruise, the photograph, the chronological account, the judge glancing up once, all of it will produce a single document that reclassifies you as divorced, which the bank already knows, which the landlord already knows, and which the classified ads have already factored into the phrase adults only. The document changes your legal status. It does not change your rent. A woman named Vera collects her copy of her decree at the clerk's window 2 people ahead of you. She folds it in half, then in half again, and puts it in her coat pocket without reading it. She has already read it. She knew what it would say. She nods at no one in particular and walks toward the elevator with the posture of a person who has just completed a very long errand and has 17 more. You read about Reno in a magazine at the dentist's office on a Tuesday afternoon while you wait for the children's checkup. The article explains that a 6-week residency in Nevada qualifies a person for a no-fault divorce. The article includes a small photograph of a hotel with a swimming pool and a man in a striped shirt. You finish the page. The cost of 6 weeks at the Riverside is $210 before food. The plane ticket from Chicago is $68. You have $84 in the savings account and 3 children in school. The magazine doesn't mention the children. 6 weeks is 6 weeks of school missed, or 6 weeks of someone watching them, or 6 weeks of bringing 3 children to a hotel in Nevada and explaining to the front desk that this is a legal proceeding and not a vacation. The man in the striped shirt by the pool does not appear to have children. He looks comfortable. He looks like someone who has already handled his paperwork. Back home, the alternative is Illinois. Illinois requires fault. The grounds are adultery, cruelty, or desertion. You need proof. You need a witness, or a document, or a lawyer who charges $40 an hour to tell you that what you've described is unfortunately difficult to classify. Cruelty has a legal definition. The legal definition is narrower than the word. The lawyer. His name is Mr. Ferris, and he has a framed certificate above his desk and a secretary who is brisk, polite, and aggressively unhelpful about the coffee. She offers it in a way that makes clear you will not be offered coffee. Mr. Ferris reviews your case and uses the phrase insufficient grounds 3 times in 12 minutes. He also mentions his retainer, which is $75, which is 2 weeks of typing. He taps his pen on the desk while he explains this. The pen is expensive. You notice the pen. Now, even if you get the decree, through Mr. Ferris, through the courthouse, through sufficient grounds, the decree is a piece of paper. It says he owes you $40 a month per child. It does not say he will pay it. Fewer than half of child support orders are fully complied with in the first year. The other half pay partially or irregularly, or not at all. The court will send a letter. The letter costs nothing to ignore from across a state line. There is no enforcement mechanism that doesn't require you to hire Mr. Ferris again. The magazine itself has opinions about your situation. Opinions it expresses through the structural omission of any household that doesn't include the man in the striped shirt. The article calls Reno a fresh start. That's the phrase, fresh start. The photograph of the pool catches the afternoon light in a way that looks expensive and clean and completely unrelated to anything in your current situation. The swimming pool is doing a lot of work in that photograph. It is carrying the whole argument. What the article doesn't print, because it's a magazine and not a ledger, is what comes after the 6 weeks. The decree reclassifies you. The bank already knows your status before you walk in the door. The joint account was in his name, the credit history attached to it was his, and the day the decree was final, the account closed. You don't have bad credit. You have no credit. Those are different problems, except to a bank, where they are the same problem, stated twice. The landlord in the new building on Kimball runs a classified in the Tribune that reads adults only. This is legal. There is no law against it. You call anyway. The landlord is polite. He says the unit has already been taken. The unit appears in the Tribune again the following Thursday. You fold the magazine back the way you found it. The children come out of the examination room. The youngest has a new filling. The dentist's receptionist says that'll be $4.50, and you open your purse, and the man in the striped shirt is still by the pool in Nevada, and the swimming pool is still catching the light, and none of it is for you. You check the mailbox in the lobby every afternoon at 4:40 when you come home from work, because the support check is due on the 1st and the 15th. Today is the 22nd. The box contains the gas bill, a flyer from the A&P, and a postcard from your mother in Iowa. You open the small metal door and close it again. The mailbox, an unsentimental brass thing with a number stamped on the front, has no opinion about any of this. You do this every weekday at 4:40. The clerk at the post office on the corner has, twice in the past year, asked whether everything is all right. You have, twice, said yes. The check is not coming. You know this the way you know the furnace cycles twice before the heat actually reaches the bedroom, through accumulated experience and a complete absence of surprise. Fewer than half of fathers in compliance with a court support order are actually in compliance. The order exists. The compliance is optional. The court has a mechanism for enforcement in the same way a screen door has a mechanism for keeping out the cold. Let's talk about what the check was supposed to cover. The decree said $40 a month. $40 in 1958 is supposed to represent your former husband's contribution to the 2 children he fathered, fed occasionally, and then stopped feeding when a judge in a wood-panelled room said he could. $40 is also, for reference, roughly what you spend on food in a month if you are careful, which you are. You are extremely careful. You have become a person whose entire cognitive life runs on careful, a social worker named Mrs. Pruitt stops by on a Tuesday at 6 in the morning, not 6 in the evening, 6 in the morning when the light through the kitchen window is still grey and the children aren't dressed yet. She has a clipboard. She would like to check whether there is a man living in the household. She checks the closet. She checks under the bathroom sink. She checks behind the coats by the front door with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this so many times that she no longer notices what it is she's doing. There isn't a man. There has not been a man. You stand in your housecoat and watch Mrs. Pruitt writes something on her clipboard and nod, and then she leaves, and the children ask who that was, and you say a lady from the government, and they accept this because they are 6 and 4 and the government is an abstraction that apparently sends ladies with clipboards before breakfast. The ADC benefit arrives, when it arrives, at $120 a month. 40 to 50 of that is food. The milk is powdered, chalky, faintly sour, and comes in a paper sack that your older one has started refusing. You mix it in the kitchen with the light off because somehow doing it in the dark feels less like something that needs to be witnessed. The government also sends surplus commodities, canned pork, cornmeal, a block of processed cheese that has the structural confidence of a doorstop. It's basically a meal kit, except every ingredient is beige and nobody asked you if you wanted it. The gas bill is $4.70. You set it on the counter next to the flyer from the A&P. The flyer has a photograph of a woman in a full skirt, pressed, lipsticked, and aggressively rested, holding a casserole dish and smiling at someone who is presumably just off frame and definitely present. The woman in the photograph has a husband. The flyer assumes you do too. The flyer has made this assumption in every edition you can remember. You make a list on the back of the postcard from Iowa because paper is paper. Rent is $62, gas is $4.70. The children need shoes. The younger one's left toe is coming through, and shoes are $2.50 at Woolworths if you catch the sale. The doctor's visit you've been putting off for 6 weeks is $3, which is 4 hours of typing, which is not an abstraction but a specific physical quantity of labour you can feel in your right wrist. You add the numbers. You add them again. The second total is the same as the first. The numbers don't improve with repetition, but you check anyway, the same way you check the mailbox at 4:40, because sometimes the thing you're waiting for arrives. You sit at the kitchen table with your cousin Ruth on a Thursday afternoon in October, while she explains that she is 3 months along and unmarried, and that her mother has arranged for her to spend the next 6 months at a home in Indianapolis. The home is run by the Florence Crittenton Mission. The arrangement requires that she give the baby up for adoption at the end. She asks whether you will take her to Union Station on Sunday. You say yes. You make a second pot of coffee. You sit with her until the children come home. About 200 Florence Crittenton homes operate across the country by 1957, along with facilities run by the Salvation Army and Catholic Charities. The brochure, when it arrives in the mail in a buff envelope 2 days later, is a small marvel of euphemism, discreet, dignified, and entirely truthful in a way that depends on which words you have already agreed to skip. They present themselves as havens. The word in the brochure is refuge. The rooms are clean. The meals are regular. A house mother supervises the common areas, patient, watchful, and reliably benevolent in ways the paperwork is not, with the focused serenity of someone who has made a decision about you before you walked in. You already know what the 6 months looks like, because your aunt told you about a girl from the parish in 1953. Light chores. Group sessions. Waiting, mainly. At the end of it, a social worker slides a set of documents across a desk and explains that the baby is going to a married couple, stable, employed, church-going, and that this is better. The documents agree. The girl signs them. This is how it goes for about 100,000 white infants in 1957 alone. Black unmarried mothers are not generally admitted to homes like the one in Indianapolis. They're directed toward welfare rolls instead, and then, in states like Louisiana, removed from them. Louisiana's 1960 suitable home law takes roughly 23,000 children off ADC rolls based on the perceived moral character of their mothers. Almost all of them are black. The law doesn't say that out loud. Ruth is not being offered childcare. She is not being offered housing assistance or a wage that would let her keep the baby and rent a room and buy powdered milk and pay someone to watch a newborn while she types. She is being offered a clean room in Indianapolis and the legal mechanism to sign something irreversible. The brochure calls this a refuge. The brochure is printed in dark green ink on cream cardstock and folds in 3. Margaret, the house mother at a facility like Ruth's, sets a bowl of oatmeal in front of each girl every morning with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this 4,000 times and feels, each time, that she is performing a kindness. She probably is. She probably also believes everything she has been told about what happens to the babies. She folds the dish towel over the oven handle with a small, satisfied snap and moves to the next bowl. She doesn't ask questions. The dish towel has heard everything anyway. You drive Ruth to Union Station on Sunday. She has a suitcase and a hat and a look that isn't quite fear and isn't quite calm. You carry the suitcase to the platform. You hug her on the platform. You watch the train go. You drive home. The children are with a neighbour. You pick them up. You make dinner. You do the arithmetic in your head again. The rent, the shoes, the deferred doctor's visit, and you think about Ruth on the train to Indianapolis. And you don't say any of it out loud. By the time Ruth comes back in the spring, the baby will be gone, and the subject will be closed. Her mother will refer to it, once, as a difficult period. Ruth will not correct her. She'll get a job at a department store cosmetics counter. She'll start going to church again on Sundays, and in 3 years she'll marry a man named Gerald who sells insurance and doesn't ask about Indianapolis. The file at the Florence Crittenton mission will be sealed. You sit in a leather chair in an office on the 5th floor of a building on Michigan Avenue and fill out a 4-page intake form for the psychiatrist your older sister has paid for. The form asks about sleep, appetite, energy, marital status, children, employment, religion, and the date of your last menstrual period. There is a section called Family History of Mental Illness. There is a section called Sexual History. The doctor will see you in 12 minutes. The receptionist has already asked twice whether your husband knows that you are here. You don't have a husband. This is, in fact, why you're here. The form doesn't seem to have anticipated this sequence of events. There's a line for husband's occupation. You leave it blank. The form treats the blank the way the receptionist treats your coat, noting it, saying nothing, drawing a quiet conclusion. The DSM, published in 1952, contains a category called sociopathic personality disturbance, which is basically a personality quiz where every result diagnoses you. The receptionist has a copy of the 1956 reprint on the shelf behind her, between a fern and a porcelain figure of a girl with a goose. The goose is small, vigilant, and reliably affronted. A divorced woman who is not coping, who has cried at work, who has stopped attending church, who has 2 children and no cosigner. She maps onto several subcategories with unfortunate precision. The clipboard in your lap is going to file you into one of them by 4 o'clock. The doctor is a man named Dr. Hargrove. He shakes your hand with 2 fingers, the way you'd handle a damp piece of mail, and sits behind a desk the size of a dining table, wide, polished, and aggressively rectangular. He asks you to describe, in your own words, why you've come. You describe the last 18 months, the divorce, the wage, the classified ads, the 6A, M, knock, the powdered milk. The walk from the bus stop in November with a stroller and wet bags and a toddler who kept sitting down in the road salt. Dr. Hargrove writes something in his notebook. He underlines it. He does not show you what he has written, but his pen moves the way a pen moves when it already knows what it's going to say. The chair you're sitting in is soft and slightly too low, so you're looking up at him. The desk is very wide. The diploma on the wall is from Johns Hopkins. The whole arrangement says, "You are a patient, and patients are problems that have presented for resolution." You're not a woman who makes $35 a week and pays $14 of it to Mrs. Kowalski down the hall to watch the kids. You're a case with presenting symptoms. He asks about your childhood. He asks about your father. He asks whether you were, before the marriage, a happy person. And the question lands the way that question always lands, which is as a suggestion that the marriage wasn't the variable. He takes 4 pages of notes. At the end of 50 minutes, he tells you that you're exhibiting signs of anxiety and adjustment disorder, and that he recommends weekly sessions at $12 each. Your sister, who has paid for this one, teaches 2nd grade in Evanston and nets about $38 a week after taxes. She cannot pay for the next one. Doctor. Hargrove's receptionist gives you a pamphlet on the way out. The pamphlet is titled The Emotionally Healthy Home. There is a drawing on the cover of a man, a woman, and 2 children standing in front of a house with a pitched roof and a car in the driveway. You fold the pamphlet and put it in your coat pocket. Outside, Michigan Avenue is very bright and very cold. You have 40 minutes before Mrs. Kowalski's patience runs out. You walk fast. You sit beside Mrs. Donnelly at the church coffee hour on the first Sunday of Advent and listen to her describe the casserole brigade that has arrived at her apartment every Tuesday since her husband died in October. The parish has organised a rotation. The Knights of Columbus have shoveled her walk. The pastor has visited 4 times. She has lost weight, she says. People have been so kind. You nod and refill her cup from the silver pitcher. You have lived in this parish for 7 years. No one has brought a casserole to your apartment. Mrs. Donnelly is a widow. You are divorced. The distinction, in 1957, is not subtle. It is the difference between a woman to whom something happened and a woman who chose wrongly. Mrs. Donnelly's husband died. Yours left, or you asked him to leave, or both, and the sequence doesn't matter to the parish because the outcome is the same. You exercised agency in a sacrament, and the casseroles go to Mrs. Donnelly. A widow gets sympathy in full, unreserved, the kind that fills a refrigerator. A divorcee gets a version of it, cautious, conditional, requiring sustained good behaviour and visible suffering in the correct register. An unwed mother gets a different word entirely, and it isn't sympathy. Mrs. Donnelly's casserole dish, currently empty on the table next to the silver pitcher, has her name written on a piece of masking tape on the bottom, so the rotation knows whose Pyrex to return. Mrs. Donnelly, to be fair, is not performing anything. She is genuinely bereft. She pats your hand when she notices you've gone quiet and says you always seem so capable, which is the nicest possible way to say you don't look like you need anything. You've gotten good at capable. Capable doesn't invite casseroles, but it doesn't invite certain other things either, and you've learned to weigh that. A woman named Patrice comes in late and takes the folding chair near the door, divorced 2 years, 1 daughter, works the early shift at the telephone exchange. She is upright, quiet, and reliably alone in the specific way that gets catalogued but never addressed. She stirs her coffee without looking up. The parish is kind to Patrice in the specific way it is kind to a problem it has decided not to address directly, politely, briefly, and at a slight angle. Nobody ignores her. Nobody sits next to her, either. She has excellent posture from years of being watched. The casserole question is not trivial. A hot dish arriving on your doorstep on a Tuesday is roughly $4 of groceries you don't have to spend, which is a doctor's visit, or 2 weeks of bus fare, or the difference between buying milk this week and not. The church's informal welfare system runs on sympathy, and sympathy in 1957 runs on narrative. Your narrative has a complication in it. Mrs. Donnelly's narrative is clean. The television in the corner of the parish hall is showing a rerun, the sound off, and the family on screen has a father in it. They all have a father in them. The shows require it structurally. The way a joke requires a setup. The family is the setup, and the father is the premise. And everything else, the mother, the children, the warm kitchen, is the punchline that proves the premise works. You watch the screen for a moment. The father is saying something reassuring. His mouth moves. The family looks relieved. You drink your coffee. Mrs. Donnelly is saying something about the Knights of Columbus and the snowblower. Patrice near the door finishes her cup, sets it on the folding table with the particular quietness of someone who has learned not to make noise when leaving, and buttons her coat from the bottom up. She's out the door before the bell on it stops moving. You think about following her. You refill Mrs. Donnelly's cup instead. It is the first Sunday of Advent. The silver pitcher is heavy, and you hold it with both hands. And so the day folds itself up. The classified ads with their adults only in capital letters. The $35 Frappa Friday envelope at the currency exchange on Holstead. The 6 a.m. knock and the closet by the front door. The brick of government cheese and the chalky milk and the orange the children split into quarters. The royal typewriter at desk 11 still jams on the letter E. The Kenmore is still on installment number 14 of 36. Miss us. Kowalski across the hall has, by now, finished her cigarette and forgotten she ever asked about your husband. It is past midnight in Chicago. The radiator is ticking. The toddler is asleep in his snowsuit on the couch because you didn't have the heart to wake him to change him. You did the arithmetic today. You did it yesterday. You will do it again tomorrow. The numbers will not change in your favor, and you will go on solving them anyway. Let your shoulders drop. Let the radiator do the talking. Let the column on the yellow page wait until morning. You're done. The math can sleep too. Good night.